and welcome to Cut Through the Noise. Cut Through the Noise is the podcast that helps business leaders increase sales through elevated communications and marketing. I'm your host, Aisling O'Rourke, founder of The Communications Coach, based here in the Republic of Ireland. I work with business leaders who want to communicate with clarity, confidence, credibility, and of course, authenticity. And you are very welcome to this week's episode of the show. In this season of Cut Through the Noise, season 12, we're focusing in on women in business and the communication tools that you need to thrive in 2026. And today's topic is one of my favourites, storytelling. And yes, I know storytelling in business has been around for a very long time. It's been around for generations. It became trendy in around 2020, but even Caesar had to tell a story to convince his troops to go into battle back in the day. So it's not a new concept, but it is still a very powerful one. Storytelling has seen a resurgence in business circles. And I don't know about you, but I grew up in a household where being a storyteller or being accused of telling tall tales was a negative thing. Whereas now the language around it has been recaptured and reimagined in a far more positive way. And I'm very happy about that. But just always stories that you tell in a business sense always have to be based in truth and backed so that you can use those stories to build trust with your audience. So stories are not just for entertainment. They actually are a neurological tool for connection. Brain imaging studies have shown that when a storyteller shares a narrative, the listener's brain mirrors the speaker's brain activity. That's just incredible. And when we use metaphors when we're telling a story, like describing a singer's voice as being a velvet voice, that activates the listener's sensory and motor cortex. And that's why stories are memorable. It's that synchrony between activating the brain and activating the sensory and motor cortexes within the brain. That's what makes it all so much more memorable. And research has shown that when we pay attention to a story, we are 22 times more likely to remember the story than we are facts alone. So, we've all been there in a presentation where the speaker has droned on and on and on about stats, and it's like a list of information, and our brains find that really difficult to process. Whereas if you had another speaker who gave you the same information, but in the form of a story, we're 22 times more likely to remember what was said. And this is why I love the power of storytelling so much. This is why I spend so much time with my clients, helping them really craft good stories for their business. In a nutshell, data becomes more persuasive when wrapped up in a story because it engages both our head and the heart. And research from Stanford's Women's Leadership Innovation Lab also suggests that combining data with narrative not only persuades, but it also shapes how others see us and engenders confidence in your vision. So if you can confidently display a story, create a narrative around what you're trying to do, perhaps it might be the impacts of a service you're trying to sell, that helps others believe in you, because you're confident in your storytelling abilities, and the storytelling method of sharing information in itself builds confidence from a listener's perspective. Good storytelling elicits emotion. So according to Paul Zak, he released a report in 2013. He found that storytelling elicits a reaction and releases chemicals in the brain. So it releases the stress hormone cortisol, and that's so that the audience can focus on the content, what is actually being said. And then oxytocin draws on our empathetic size. Okay, so that's the two. You're looking for that focus hormone cortisol and oxytocin then to really help us empathize with what a storyteller is saying. And good storytelling will draw on both. So when you're creating or crafting a story for your business, I want you to really focus on that. What can you say that will help your audience focus in on the importance of what you're saying? But then how do you draw on their emotion? How do you make it relatable to them and their life experience? For women in business, storytelling is particularly powerful. Research into personal branding in particular emphasizes authenticity, like we discussed in our episode last week. Please do go back and check out that episode if you missed it. But storytelling is how you communicate authenticity at scale. So, like a well told story can humanize your brand. It illustrates your values, and it also should demonstrate your expertise. So then where do we start? If we know that storytelling is so very powerful, uh, what do we do to incorporate it into our personal brand? So you must begin by clarifying your core narrative. Who are you? What problem do you solve? Why does it matter? Why should the audience care? Then structure your story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. There has to be a point to all of this, remember. So we have to set the scene. We have to describe the challenge, share the decision points, and reveal the outcome. Anchor the story in real events and use specific details to help listeners visualize the journey. When appropriate, integrate data such as revenue growth, client results, or impact metrics. Show tangible outcomes. Remember that vulnerability and honesty will always invite empathy, so share the setbacks and lessons learned along the way. Storytelling is a tool for sales, and particularly business-to-business sales. Value selling approaches emphasize explaining the outcomes and benefits of your solution. A story can illustrate those outcomes far more wisely than a list of features. So if I were to use it as an example, instead of saying that my communication coaching improves confidence in public speaking, I could tell the story of a client who went from dreading presentations to reaching partner status at a global financial firm. Base your stories in facts, real client stories. And then finally, we have to practice. Practice makes perfect. I remember having a maths teacher in secondary school who always said, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And that was Miss Goff in Our Lady's Bower, a boarding school. And, it stuck with me to this day, 2 decades on. So practicing them in safe spaces and then refine them based on the feedback. Now, qualified feedback from other people in business who know what you're attempting to do, not your best friend, not a family member who think you're great anyway. Make sure that your stories align with your audience's need. And remember that most people in your target audience want to know what's in it for them. Why should they care about your story? So always ask yourself, so what? A very clarifying question. When you own the narrative, you own the credibility, and that cannot be minimized. Okay, so let me say it again. When you own your own narrative, you project credibility and you invite your listeners to see themselves in your success, which makes them far more likely to want to do business with you, to want to learn from you, to want to buy from you. I love storytelling. I think it's a really important but underrated tool. And it's one that needs a bit of time and a bit of effort in order to craft what kind of story that you want to share about you, your brand, and your business. It doesn't have to be the nuts and bolts of your private life. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make, in that they feel like they need to, show everything to everyone. It's not that. It's about crafting the narrative to help your potential audience, your target market, see the value in what you do. It's far more about them and their needs than you and your personal life. So I think when you look at it from that simple mindset shift often helps us reframe the narrative around how we are communicating our unique offer and the value in what we do. In our next episode, we're going to be examining how visibility becomes a strategy and not just a habit, and how to avoid burnout that often accompanies online exposure. Because again, like I said last week, it all has to be sustainable if it's going to be successful. Now, this season is designed to help you think differently about how you communicate and to give you the practical insights you need to apply immediately. And if you'd like to join a supportive community to do this work in a structured way, you can book a discovery call with me to explore how the Clarity Collective can help you do just that. There's no pressure, just a conversation about whether or not it's the right fit for you and where you'd like to head. You can email me to find out more at hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie or visit thecommunicationscoach.ie. And of course, if you don't have a pen handy, don't worry. All of the links are in the show notes below. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Thank you for staying listening to Cut Through the Noise. Your support means the world to us. Remember that in a noisy world, clear, confident and authentic communication is what allows you and your business to stand out from the sea of sameness and cut through the noise.